Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to today morning session. We have a very interesting topic today, technologies driving logistics forward. So both the components of the topic, technologies and logistics, are really the most pertinent set of topics these days. I have a very eminent set of panel members with me today this morning. So already they've been introduced. So looking forward to a very engaging conversation. And my request, as always, to everyone is, we'd like to converse a lot about real issues, practical challenges, solutions, use cases, which we can all relate to. So I'll request all my panel members to throw a lot of light on those kind of examples so that they are good takeaways for all of us as we wrap up the session today. Just as a start, I would like to possibly share a set of data points coming in from one of the latest PwC surveys that we do every year. So this was a survey that was done with a lot of CEOs globally. There was a mention of it yesterday as well by our global chairman, Bob Moritz. While I will talk about a lot of India numbers on the survey so that we can possibly relate to that a little better. Some of the numbers or the percentages I'd like to mention are like 62% of Indian CEOs are looking at the fact that the customer demand is changing and it is going to impact profitability of their respective industries. It's a big number, 62%. And what that means is many companies are resorting to several initiatives to really look at that and transform their organizations towards that. 67% of Indian CEOs are talking about rewiring their supply chains. A very large number again, a very significant percentage of 67%. And again, rewiring to look at all these geopolitical issues, looking at disruptions, technology, competition, and so on and so forth. 59% of Indian CEOs are talking about costs, reducing costs, optimizing costs, managing their cost structures, and making them more efficient. Lastly, a very, very important parameter, 53%, which is more than 50%, CEOs are worried about the technology disruption, whether it's in the form of AI, blockchain, ML, cognitive automation, and so on and so forth. So a number of those technology initiatives or technologies that are coming around. And there's, again, all of these percentages, what they signify is they're all above 50%, to as high as about 65, 69%. So there's a huge amount of, you could say, concern that Indian CEOs have around these various issues that I spoke about. And therefore, all of that lead to the fact that, yes, in some form and shape, supply chains is at the heart of a lot of these issues, and companies are looking to rewire their supply chains. And of course, that's where the logistics angle comes in very, very strongly. In India, as we all know, logistics sector is upwards of about $200 billion, maybe 200 to 250 different numbers, different estimates. Government always talks about 14% kind of a cost of logistics in the country, and as part of the national logistics policy, which was launched last year, government is endeavoring to bring it down to a single-digit percentage over the next few years. And of course, industry is participating. Many of you out here today would have been a part of a lot of cohorts and discussion groups when the new policy got formalized. So clearly all around logistics, supply chain at the heart of everything. Even most of the political leadership these days talks about supply chain. So that's really music to people like us and people like myself who are in the supply chain domain and all of us around here. So just moving on without much ado, let me now turn to my panel members and try to elicit some, I would say, very interesting and detailed responses on these topics. Maybe I can start with Kapil, you first. You come in from the industry, Allcargo, a leader in this whole space of providing logistics services and solutions to different clients, India and globally. What are you seeing as the latest issues and challenges and new trends that are emerging, especially post-pandemic? The world has changed, as we all talk about, but what is it, that you're seeing which is like different than what it was before? And what are your thoughts around that?
Okay, thank you, and good morning, everyone. So post-pandemic, I think a lot has changed. So I've been in this industry for, I think, about close to 6 years now, coming from core consulting and services with IBM earlier. And I think the adoption, there have been certain early adopters of technology. And I'm talking about the India context, and probably I can talk about the global as well. And then there are certain organizations who are trying to catch up, right? So here, I think why I was in this industry is basically because I just felt that it's a very good amalgamation of technology and business, right? So whatever you can think of for, say, the next 2 decades, right, whether it's blockchain, whether it's drone, whether it's IoT, it's been there for a while. Any emerging tech, AR, VR, all of them have got use cases that could disrupt and make this industry very efficient. Global, I think numbers, if I look at it, like you spoke about 14% spend on GDP versus 8 to 9 in a developed country. So we have a far way to go, but one could argue why 8%? Why can't it be a 4% or a 5%? Because if we are able to reduce that number, I think it'll effectively impact every facet of what we do, whether it's business or our personal lives, right? It'll bring down the cost, it'll bring a lot of efficiencies across different verticals. So looking at emerging tech, I think what has happened in the post-COVID is that there has been a sense of urgency with the organizations, specifically in logistics, to kind of make that change, right? To jump on the bandwagon and push the accelerator. IoT is not new in logistics. I think it started in logistics to an extent, right? In different shapes and forms. If you look at blockchain, it's been there for a while. We've recently had IBM shut down its blockchain platform, right? But if you look at some of the new use cases, there's a lot of traction there. We as an organization have been having a maniacal focus around digital. We're working on use cases, say, related to drones. How do we use them to effectively, say, look at the stock volumes on the warehouse without manual intervention? And again, these are first of the kind in the industry. So obviously, there's a lot of experimentation that goes before they become practical and come at a level where they could be democratized across the organization. So I think that probably has changed. Until then, if I've had experience with, say, financial services, with pharma, with banking, co-banking, insurance. Technology has always been the powerhouse driving FSS sector, right? So, but I think I've seen that change now, even in mid-sized companies within India and abroad, right? Not just company of our size. So there are disruptors everywhere. We do a lot of startup program mentoring and stuff like that. And if you look at it, at one point, the maximum startups were in this space or a related space, right? Something to do with logistics, whether it were battery drones that could, or battery cars or equipment that could move stuff around the warehouses, or it could be related to certain platforms that could enable end-to-end digital interaction. So I think it's been there for a while, but the last 2 years, 2.5 years, we've seen a sudden acceleration, both in the startup world and both within the core industry itself.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe that leads me to a follow-on question for Prajakt. Prajakt, you are at the heart of this whole startup ecosystem and huge amount of action in what's happening around. And as Kapil said, that maybe the maximum number of startups are possibly in this space of catering to and trying to solve those problems. What's your take on this whole ecosystem that is evolving in India? I know it's a lot of action. Maybe there's a lot of money also available, which possibly is dried up a bit. But then, how are you seeing the next 2 to 3 years?
Saurabh, it's important to see what's driving the technology adoption. If you look at the change business dynamics, and we'll come to that in a bit, companies recognize that they need much better visibility of their overall supply chain than they were previously getting. And as a result of that, that is requiring them to have digital adoption or enabling technologies that will give them a much better view of all the stakeholders. Now, what are the changes driving this need? One is, shifting manufacturing destinations and distributed manufacturing, omni-channel, where it has now started becoming mainstream across all organizations. Previously, it was okay in terms of, the people knew how to manage the physical distribution part. Now, with omni-channel, there is a certain level of nimbleness and flexibility that is required, which means that you need to be interconnected with the larger ecosystem. And the third is because there are lots of enabling, people like, say, for example, Shiprocket, etc., that have come up, which allow organizations to open up newer markets that were otherwise not possible. Now, all of these require people to, if they have to leverage the opportunities and if they have to survive in this environment, technology has to be the foundation on which the supply chain will have to be built. And those are the areas where we are seeing a lot of startups coming in. Now it's interesting to see what kind of technologies are being introduced by startups. Now most organizations will have core ERP platforms and sort of the legacy systems, strong as it may be. They may be sort of not have innovations on specific use cases. For example, if somebody wants to do significantly better in reverse logistics, there are specific or specialized innovation or innovative solutions created by startups that optimize the reverse logistics component of logistics. Now these solutions can sit on top of existing solutions, and that's driving the entire transformation as we are seeing from it. So we believe that any solutions that are creating optimization of the overall supply chain, including logistics, have a significant tailwind behind them, and that's going to continue in our view for the next 2 or 3 decades.
Oh yeah, no, that's an interesting insight. And maybe before I turn to the solution provider, the community that's represented here, let me turn to Saurabh. Before that, Saurabh, I'll give you my mic. Saurabh, from a global perspective, and I just want to step back a bit here. See, a lot of what we're talking about is very India-specific issues and challenges. But if we step back a little, do you see that some of the global initiatives in this space of logistics, warehousing, supply chain as a whole, those solutions can be replicated in India, or India needs its own nuanced approach, nuanced solution, which is very specific to our own challenges, which are specific to the country? That's one question. Second is, anything from a global perspective you'd like to throw light on in terms of specific new trends, which are possibly already happening there, but India will also get there in the next few years?
Sure. So, to your question, whether some of the global, technologies, global solutions that are being built can be applied to India, I think at the thematic level, of course, for example, the whole point that Prajakt was making, digitization of the journeys, digitization of the flows, the processes, and visibility, is something that I think has evolved quite a bit. If you look at other markets, developed markets, it's almost table stakes now. Every company has to give it to its customers. I think that trend in India also has picked up quite a bit, but there is still room to go, right? So if you look at the Indian landscape, we see about of the traditional incumbents, about 30% to 40% of the companies who have really invested behind this and have started to sort of offer these kinds of services to its customers as well. But there's still this 60% sort of company which is trying to catch up, and I think it's high time that they accelerate that process, because in India also, as we talk to our customers across sectors and industry, this is increasingly becoming table stakes, right? They would demand this both in B2C and B2B logistics. So some of those things that have become now commonplace in the West is of course going to become commonplace also in India. I think a lot of investments that we are seeing in the West are around 2-3 kinds of things. Some of it are applicable and some probably not in the near future. One, as Prajakt was again saying, a lot of investments now on the as you digitize the supply chain, you generate a lot of data, at different points in time, right? So you implemented IoT, you implemented, hardware, you implemented, digitized processes, you're getting data from your suppliers, from your customers, your own internal, journeys that you've designed. What do you do with the data now, right? And there's enormous amount of data being generated, but, your ability to use the data effectively to drive insights, to drive efficiency, to drive better responsiveness, to improve cost and so on, is where the value pool sits today, right? And there's a lot of investment we are seeing in the West that companies are doing behind this. The second kind of thing that companies are doing a lot is creating an open architecture platform, right? To be able to integrate a series of partners, right? Nobody's going to. There's no point building full digital stack in-house. There's a lot of good service providers available. Your customers, ability to embed more deeply into their digital system, even at the supplier side, ability to embed more deeply into their, technology architecture is becoming extremely important. So building an open, a future-looking, technology architecture and open architecture is again a very important investment area. Again, some companies have done this well in India, but most companies that we still talk to are still very behind, on that curve, right? So those kinds of trends, I think, are definitely going to get more impetus, as we see in India. Of course, the challenges and the specific nuances, the regulators are different, the customer needs are different, the multimodal mix are different, and those need to be solved very specifically for India, which is where the Indian startup ecosystem or the traditional companies have an opportunity to differentiate themselves. And then there are technologies like blockchain. So blockchain has received the most amount of funding in the last 4 years, right? 50% growth in funding in the last 4 years, right? It's still a technology which is out there, but I think there's a lot of potential. So it's something that a lot of investment is coming into the space, but I think it's still early probably in India for that to happen. Automation is another area. Automation around delivery systems, drones and things like that. I think there's a lot of interesting pilots happening. There's a company called Zipline which has done already 5 lakh parcel deliveries using drones. So that's very interesting. That's happening there. Automation in warehouse is picking up significantly. But again, because of the cost structure that we have, the labor force cost structure in India, it may take time to sort of come in full force in India, right? So that's at least our perspective on that.
Sure, thanks, Saurabh. Now again, a very interesting insight. Yes, I mean, India would need its own set of solutions because the problems are also very specific to India. And there are, of course, global ideas, global innovations that can always be brought to India, but then they will need that level of customization to suit to our requirements. Let me now look at some very specific solutions that are being offered and by the startup ecosystem in India. So Gautam, if I could turn to you first. See, when we talk about supply chain, largely 3 tenets of supply chain we talk about. Resilience, which has become so very important, right, post-pandemic and onwards now. Every company, every client of yours, I'm sure, must also be talking about that. Agility, extremely important in the current times. There's a huge amount of volatility, demand changes, demand sensing kind of solution. Then ultimately, a company needs to be super agile to cater to that. And last but not the least, sustainability. I think these 3 tenets have become so very important in the current times for supply chain logistics professionals and organizations. So from your perspective, as a solution provider, where are you seeing the greatest need from your clients, and how are you really catering to some of those requirements?
I think I would like to touch upon largely 2 areas to maybe answer that question. See, one is where you would find new business models coming up. So D2C was a new business model that you could sell, your brand could sell goods directly to the seller, to the buyer. And the second that I'm seeing now is D2R, where you are directly selling to a retailer. A large FMCG company is not super keen on following the regular supply chain. All of them are largely posed towards profitability, right? If you sell directly to the consumer, you'll be more profitable. The assumptions are that. If you directly sell to retailer, you'll be more profitable. That is the assumption. So when you build such business models, you need to have the supply chain to be able to support something like that. Now, just to give you some numbers, D2C today in a delivery economy like a North American economy is 50% of the total e-commerce business which happens there. Now, I'll take up that, and if you look at large FMCG companies, they might still use the distributors for the financial modeling, financial support of the transaction and the sales part of the transaction, but the supply chain they want to take away because they want to deliver faster to their retailers or maybe directly to the general trade or modern trade outlets that they work with, just to have their products in the shelf at the right time, shorten the supply chain, shorten the cash flow. That are some of the trends which have shaped up at least the industry that we work in. Now, coming back to the D2C category. Now, when you typically end up competing with the large marketplace, competing for your own product. You might have used the same marketplace for discovery and you got early customers there. But eventually, if you go and buy a shoe from a brand and the same shoe is available on marketplace, which is the most probable scenario, you will end up buying from a marketplace. And the biggest reason, earlier the reason used to be price, trust, payment methods, etc., etc. It's not the reason anymore. It is because you trust the brand, your price is the same. Now you can't have differentiated prices. Then don't have differentiated prices. The main challenge is the delivery timelines, where a large marketplace will promise you today, tomorrow. A seller or a brand would not promise you anything. And and then you work with two categories of customers: people who are offline first, going online now. Then the other aspect of people who are online and now going offline. So I think designing the supply chain for people like this is essentially the most important thing. And most of what my panelists have already said, it is the technology is there now. With all these startups coming in each and every nuance of the supply chain, the technology, they have brought the technology, they've developed the technology. The real value is having an ecosystem to be able to orchestrate that for the customer and build out analytics around it, actionable analytics around it, data, right? And data is not just data, it's also intelligence. Because once you start interacting with these complex supply chain, you need to have data that can be used across the platform. And it's all intelligence, right? How do I reduce my returns? How do I increase my conversion? How do I give experience to my customer? How can I, if I know the customer, I know the address, how can I deliver it on the same address? So all that is intelligence which is coming from that data. How do you make that actionable? And then you connect them with all these different aspects of the supply chain. I think that is the value, real value, which is, and this you can copy paste this to any industry that the supply chain industry would service. But for me, it's specific to retail, so both offline to online, online to offline, everything. So,
thanks, Gautam. Again, interesting insights. Just to add, one of the largest consumer durables organization in India currently is selling more than 10% of its, value or revenue in a D2C manner, and which is like they sell all kind of electronics, whether it's LED panels, mobile phones, other equipment, other gadgets like washing machine and so on and so forth, refrigerators, high end. So 10% and more, which is a significant change. And as a result of that, what you see in the market today is many more consumer durables, electronics companies are wanting to go D2C whole hog, and they're all investing, building their platforms, building their supply chain models to really cater to that kind of demand potential which is there. And Gautam, thanks for the insight. Uttam, just talking about this whole piece, look, whenever you talk about supply chain, costs is always a question, right? Service levels, yes, everyone wants the maximum possible 95, 98, 99% service levels, but then cost becomes always a big question mark. And supply chain professionals, I'm sure in the room would agree with me that they all get beaten up on the cost front, which personally I don't think is the right way. Supply chain is a board level function these days, not just a cost function. What's your take on this whole aspect of service level versus cost conundrum? Because this is a perennial issue, and how do we really have supply chain become more like a competitive differentiator than just become like a cost kind of a function?
So I think just wanted to add some color on our user audience first, because I think it's a very different user audience than the other panelists are dealing with. I think if you see our user audience is a small SME. When we say SMEs, typically it can be a manufacturer, distributor, or a retailer. And these people usually in a pre-pandemic era, they were very heavily dependent on offline ways of interaction, where I would have a shop, people would visit my shop, and I would sell the stuff to him, and most probably he would take deliveries. Delivery responsibility himself, the last mile he would do it himself. What happened in pandemic essentially was that there was no traffic on the shop, right? And essentially both the user and the business, or the consumer or the business, have to figure it out that how this would be delivered. So they used to interact on phone, WhatsApp, and again I think would use platform like us or Shiprocket for deliveries. Now what has happened, this is a habit which got formed during pandemic, but I think this was not able to change. Now the customer wants the same experience, and this is a new cost, which was non-existent before. So I think there are, so for them I think it's a very big problem, because this might contribute, depending to industry, somewhere between 4 to 10% of what the GMV is. And I think I think it's a shared responsibility with everybody in the ecosystem, where on one hand side, we are thinking about solutions, how to make it lesser and lesser. I think the way we went about it is that we created right set of assortments of services that given the goods capacity, goods type, you use the right capacity. So let's say if you have a 10 kg parcel, you use a two-wheeler to deliver. If you have a 400 kg parcel, you use a three-wheeler to deliver, and so on and so forth. Again, there are certain gaps in the market where parcel of certain size, you don't have assortment of vehicles for everybody. So I think that's something which I think usually in global market people use cabs, autos to deliver. Again, I think in India the regulation doesn't allow us. We are working into that. But again, I think and I think on the who bears that cost. Again, I think people. It depends on the product. If it's a very push-based product, it's usually the business who would bear it. If it is a pull-based product, I think people would pass it on to their customer. So again, I feel at the moment, this is a new cost and people are just figuring it out that what to do about this cost, who would bear it, and so on and so forth. And I think experience, the threshold of customers is always increasing. So I think that's what the dilemma which our consumer is going through. And I think the way we are committed is that we are how we can solve, how do we make it the cost and the experience trade-off better for the user. So I think that's how we are dealing with it. That's where the innovation is going.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, Prajakt.
You know, when you look at technology, actually technology addresses both. It allows you to provide a better experience, and at the same time, because it creates significant operational efficiencies, you are able to therefore operate at a lower cost level. Now, whether those costs get transferred to the to the buyer, etc., or the business models, but inherently using technology, cost as well as experience gets enhanced quite significantly, as we have seen in a number of areas. I mean, the gentlemen here have used obviously technology to be able to create significant efficiencies versus some of the legacy players, as well as provide the kind of experience that we were not used to maybe 5 or 7 or 10 years ago, for sure.
Absolutely. Please.
It's also important how startups like us are behaving. Is we are trying to build the technology, which is the experience layer and the operation capability. It's also what we're doing is we are building up efficiencies in the supply itself. So if Porter is the cost of a particular vehicle will cost you more because it is not utilized properly. Now Porter ensures that there's a proper utilization of an asset, which is they don't own that asset. I think, right? Somebody else owns the asset, but if the utilization is good enough, it's like Uber, right? Yeah. Now, on your specific question, cost. I think for mostly all companies which have large supply chain, there is need to retrospectively look at themselves, understand their supply chain, the cost, the deficiencies, the changes in the cost structure are actually sitting in their own decisions of how they work. How do they do their inventory planning? How do they do the demand planning? How do they spread their products across? And then our job as either asset companies who own assets, or asset-light companies or asset-less companies is, so enablers essentially is to be able to provide all of these in a way which is variabilized, so that now if an Allcargo warehouse can be utilized for multi-tenancy, that means somebody is not paying for half a empty warehouse or maybe 10% half a warehouse or an asset. Somebody else is paying for it. That is the right way to go about it.
Thanks. And just to add, I think for small D2C brands or SME, I think leveraging this equation of cost and experience is very difficult. So I think there is a significant opportunity to provide that to them and provide them a level playing field so that they can compete with big platforms, large companies.
Got it. Thanks. And maybe Kapil, if I could come to you now. Any specific use cases building on the examples and the points that were already mentioned? Use cases from your organization standpoint that you are kind of working on, or you've already possibly built some solutions for your customers? Because I think in a 3PL LSP scenario, a domain expertise for a particular sector is extremely critical, right? That's how you solve specific problems. For example, if it's pharma, chemicals, they're very niche specific industries. If you go to automotive, very specific requirements. So just the question is, any specific use cases that Allcargo is right now solving or has solved and investing behind for the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think we have a fairly mature digital organization within the overall group, and as a part of that, we are So basically, see, the end objective, I think, or the mandate for us is to build a cognitive enterprise, let me put it that way. Right? So how do you put cognition into whatever you do? Right? Now, I'm not going to talk about the startup world because, that cost takeout itself kind of runs into decades, and there is a whole funding and burning of funds. You've seen that. And then there is a sustainable business model, right? So obviously it can't, just kind of blow up like a startup because there's a sustainable model that's driving it. But looking at technology there and the use cases, coming to the use cases there, is that we look at every business process and we're trying to reimagine the process and say that, can we do this differently? Do we even need to do this in the first place, right? And then obviously there are sides of the business which are very compliance and very controlled that you really can't really reimagine. Like e-Waybill, when it came in India, no one thought about it. You had to comply overnight. There was a huge cost of doing it. There was no ecosystem, startup ecosystem that existed. So you could use some, players like a PwC or a KPMG or LSPs that were there, or you could build it out. So there's always that call of, do I build it out and have the first mover advantage, or do I, just kind of rely on whatever is there out in the market? And how do I do it the right way, right? So I think, as I said, when we are reimagining a lot of these processes, so there's a whole AI machine learning team that we have data scientists who are have been onboarded in the last few years. Vaishnav is leading that digital piece for us within the organization. And as a part of that, we're looking at all these problems that we spoke about, right? Whether it's drone delivery, drone comes later. To me, that's maybe the level 4, level 5, right? Because everyone's trying to solve that problem. There is no tangible or a open business model that works for that business, right? There are a lot of questions around how you do it. But things like, if I have containers and we are into the LCL business, then if my containers are full, I'm going to be profitable. Every box that I add is directly adds to my bottom line, right? So how do I do that? How do I predict loads coming in? How do I commit on containers which are there for more profitable routes, right? How do I optimize my entire fleet? For example, if I look at my the other group company called Gati, now we have this whole network of vendor ecosystem or truck partners, right, that we work with. Now, if I'm operating with, say, 6,000 vehicles, can I operate with 4,000? Can I operate with 5,000? There's always this question mark, you add a fleet because you've acquired a new customer. And then somewhere down the road, the customer leaves, the fleet never goes off, right? So how do you build predictive models that can help you, that can help business to kind of tell business in a way? And then we want to go at a level where it can tell the business that, hey, take these 2 vehicles out, right? Or re-plan this route because a new highway has come up. Yep. Right? So there's so much that you could do, and I think a lot of those use cases, there are a few that are kind of confidential, but a lot of those use cases we're trying to see, can we do that, right? Question. And also I think more than anything, it's the change has to happen at the business level. So it's not always a technology change. You might have a great solution, right? But is business ready to take up that solution? Is your customer ready to take it? Right? We talk about these integrations. I know working with Samsungs of the world, it's not easy for them to even add a field in their SAP systems. So they rely on external IT partners to do that, right? I hope there's no Samsung guys here. But so it's not, so there's the business side and then there's the technology side, and I think then there's the practical side, right? So you got to play in that practical zone and see how technology can leverage.
On that, I think Kapil is making a very interesting point, and I'll build on it, but let me just share some data. So we did a survey of 600 plus companies and an analysis of S&P 1200 companies around the world, right? There are almost 3 types of companies that are emerging. One are digital natives, right? Companies like Shiprocket and Porter, right? Who have digital first and come in and disrupted the industry, very much in logistics supply chain also. Then there are legacy companies which have got split up into 2 types of now players. Some companies have become digital incumbents, have been able to adopt, look at, the natives and adopt digital in a much faster way. And then there are these legacy incumbents who have been slow to do that, right? Now, if you look at their performance in terms of shareholder returns, the digital natives have been able to return 30% higher than average S&P return over the last 5 years. But the digital incumbents have also been able to return 20% higher versus S&P, 1200. And the legacy have actually underperformed by 30%, right? There's a clearly, three-speed world happening. And the point that Kapil was making is very, very powerful. See, there's a company called Flexport, right? It did a phenomenally great run and scaled up to a point, and then realized there are other parts of the business which actually creates value beyond digital. The customer relationship, the ability to sort of, solve for very specific on-the-ground custom regulatory issues using, a physical team and so on, right, is very important, which is a great asset that a company like Allcargo has, over years of experience on the ground, network and so on, and that creates a lot of value. So if you look at Flexport's returns, 70% of the return came from digital use cases, and whereas maybe for a digital incumbent in that industry, only 30% value came from digital. But there are other parts of the business which are creating a lot of value. So I think there will be this convergence now, very interesting convergence, where the digital natives would have to now build other parts of the muscles of the business. And while the digital legacy companies will increasingly become more savvy about using digital. The problem is with the legacy incumbents, and I think if they don't act fast, they're going to really lose out for the market. Right? So it's a very important aspect of how this is all evolving.
Thanks, Saurabh and Kapil. Very recently, I saw, where I stay in Gurgaon, a drone which crashed right in front of our place of stay. And then we figured out that drone was actually carrying blood samples from, I think, maybe Noida to somewhere. It just crashed because of, I think, battery issue. So I think there are pitfalls as well of these technologies. Blood samples, I'm sure, are very precious, right? Because I don't know whether you can go back and collect them again, and there is a need for a certain test report within time. But on a serious note, just wanted to touch upon this topic. We're seeing a lot of traction and action in the market with different clients where they look at logistics control tower. Nowadays, more and more of nerve centers, where you look at a very integrated view across your value chain, plan, make, source, deliver, right? The whole value chain. So I'd just like to get some thoughts from my panel members here that is this like something more like a fancy dashboard, or something like, let's say, a nerve center can really make a big difference to your agility, your resilience of your supply chain? That's one. Second is analytics. Again, data analytics we talk about all the time. We spoke about, there's lots of data that gets produced by our legacy systems, the new age tech, that we deploy. Now, yes, data is there, but then how do you really make use of that? So my request to my panel members would be that on these two topics, if you could share your insights and some use cases on the second one, which is around data analytics, so that from a supply chain perspective, logistics perspective, the folks out here can actually get some takeaways that this is how you could really use some of that. So maybe Saurabh, you may like to start.
Yeah, so let me pick up an example to illustrate it. I think there's no point talking about that data will create value, because it obviously will, right? But let me give you an example how a traditional company like UPS is doing some great innovation, right? So there's a platform they've built, and I think someone was mentioning about shared warehouse space. There's a company called Way to Go that they've incubated. It's a completely different company, run like a digital native. They started off by the use case saying, look, there are these warehouses we have and some external partners have. Can we bring visibility of that space on a platform and offer it to customers, or SME customers, and also maybe large corporates, right? So that was the first step, right? As they started doing that, they started getting data about the flows of the customer, right? How much are they shipping? Where are they shipping? Which geographies and so on. As they started to get the data, they said, can we offer inventory management solution, right? Can we tell them how much inventory they should keep and where they should keep that, right? So they started to then offer that as a service on the platform. They started to offer warehouse management as a service to drive efficiency in how they manage. So that data became very valuable. As they did that, they also got information about the quality of the customer, right? How good their business is, whether it's growing, profitable, whatever, right? And they said, can we now start offering financial services and insurance services on that platform? Yeah, so can we monetize it further? So, as you build these capabilities and as you acquire data, there is a lot you can do with it. Whether you're thinking about it, whether you have the right time to right team to be able to drive their insights, a continuous innovation process to think about what use cases can you build further, is how you unlock that value. So yeah, this is the next wave of value creation. To the question earlier, also service and cost trade-offs to be broken and so on. That's where all of that innovation will come from.
Thanks. Gautam, you want to go next?
So, okay, for a company, for themselves, who is a supply chain company by themselves, you can't do without a control tower, right? So it's like, there is a transaction which starts really at, say, customer ordering something or a customer looking at a product to all the way he wants to return it. There are obviously instances where it will break, right? Or there will be some issue with that particular transaction. You need to make that transaction convert into data to actionable. I can give you a different example. I don't know how relevant it is for an audience. But say example, a customer has ordered something on a website. India is a large country. It doesn't have structured addresses, doesn't have structured streets, etc. Now, somebody says that Mata ke mandir ke piche, gaon ye, kaswa number ye. That's how orders are placed in India, tier 3 towns. And now that transaction is bound to have some issues. Now when it reaches there, the person tries to deliver, reaches the phone number, the transaction doesn't go through. Now this is an aberration in the data. Now you need to make this actionable. Now a platform like mine would end up initiating a WhatsApp message which will enable the buyer to send a more detailed information to the delivery boy to be able to deliver it. So my control tower is able to look at this and make it more actionable. Obviously, there's a team behind it whose KPI is to make sure that it gets delivered, even though the circumstances are such. So control tower, making the data more actionable is something that, I don't know if that was relevant.
No, I get it. So thanks. Uttam.
So I think in our journey, I think when we started, right, I think there was very limited data. Then we went to another extreme where we had too much data and we don't know what to do with it, right? And then I think now, last couple of years we have figured out a right balance that data is important. At the same time, vision and context is also important. And I think the recipe of success lies when you marry all three. I think for us, one of the big data or data power is in the matchmaking algorithm, right? Where we feel that the matchmaking algorithm can, if it can be optimized well to cater to the preference of users on both sides, because being a platform, there are customers, which we talked about a lot today, but I think there are also a lot of suppliers, which we have not talked today in this forum. All of them have preferences, right? And I think if you matchmake well, I think you create delight experience and hence further organic growth. Right? I think that's where I think Saurabh also mentioned that with innovation, with data, I think you can break that notion of cost and experience. So again, I think that's the limit point which I would want to tell, that data is fine, but I think over obsessing it without vision and context, I think might not be fruitful. At times, I think it leads to a state of indecisiveness.
Yes.
Thanks,
Uttam. And Prajakt, just to add onto this particular question itself, that are there any startups who are out there solving this whole data, issue or analysis issue specific to supply chain? And second, platform for a control tower or a nerve center off the shelf?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of companies doing that. But, you should look at technology as one big basket. There are specific people doing very specific nuanced solutions. And all of those then become the supply chain technology platform or stack for companies. And yes, there are companies who are getting it all together and providing it as a control tower as well. So at every level, there is innovation happening. Companies need to really be able to integrate all of that and then use it in a more actionable manner. But let me illustrate with a use case and then give you one example as well. I mean, think about omni-channel. Nobody knows whether a Saurabh will go to a shop and look at the phone and then come and buy it online, or whether he will research online and then go and buy it in the shop. And so therefore, as a brand, do I stock more in the store, or do I stock more in my warehouse in Manesar? Because when Saurabh orders it online, he wants it in 2 hours. So kaun se micro warehouse mein ya kaun se store mein rakhna hai, and that nimbleness that is required cannot be done without a control tower or some data that allows you to manage the inventory well at a optimized level. Otherwise, you can stock everywhere. I mean, that's not a solution. And so therefore, those are the kind of use cases where companies can, optimize using technologies for supply chain. But let me also illustrate with an example of how companies are using data to inevitably create significant optimization. Now, demand forecasting, say for example, fashion and lifestyle brands for shirts, trousers, shoes, etc., all these kinds of things. One of the largest cost component is the cost of dead inventory and unsold goods. Now, how do you optimize that? There is one of our portfolio companies, Stylomia, is actually using AI to help fashion and lifestyle brands predict how much to make. So they can say, ki, boss, this pink shirt in size 42 make only 32,000 pieces and not 50,000 pieces that you would have made. And this blue shirt in 38 to 43 sizes make 58,000. Literally to that level where they're able to get the brands to predict 30% better than what their design teams internally would ever have been able to. Now, not only that, they are able to go to a level where they can say, in these pin codes, you will need more of blue colored 38 size to 42 size, things. And in that place, you will need more whites in 44 size and stuff. And that nimbleness can then be translated into how you build operational efficiencies through logistics, etc.
Thanks. And Kapil, you spoke about cognitive automation earlier. Say, look, there are two views that I hear all the time. One, we say that the job of a supply chain professional may become redundant because it could be lot and to a large extent managed through cognitive automation, and the role of a professional comes in only for handling exceptions. So that's one view. The other is supply chain professionals are all firefighters, right? Every day there's a fire and they're dousing that fire, right? As much as you can. So how are you seeing the role of this whole cognitive automation as a technology to really streamline, stabilize, harmonize supply chains and actually run it by looking at only exceptions?
Okay, sorry, before I answer that, I just wanted to pitch in because you had asked about a use case. So the nerve center, command center, the fellow panelists talked about it. That's been a concept that's been there for decades, right? If you look at, say, a Walmart, or some of my clients, right? Or maybe Shell, there is a command center. You can't run oil rigs without a small mishap could mean a big thing, right? So I think what's the industry's pivoting towards is a command center that's intelligent, right? So if I look at use cases now, if I think we spoke about tracking a transaction from the entry to the exit, but in the real world it doesn't work like that, right? Because you could be having millions of transactions running on an ERP on an everyday basis. So how do you manage exceptions, right? Proactively, that's the game changer, right? So if I could say that this truck, which is supposed to be unloaded in 2 hours, and looking at how that real-time unloading is happening on that truck, and I could tell you in 1 hour I've just unloaded 10%, and an alert comes to the hub manager saying this truck is not getting loaded, go, act, right? And I go and act on the ground and make it unload in 2 hours. That to me is the game changer, right? Because there are hundreds of trucks getting unloaded. The command center will give you a report at the end. That won't help you. So I think our business, I'm specifically talking about our logistics and supply chain space, is all about operations. How effectively we move stuff is the game changer, right? So every hour, every day that we save is value prop for the customer, and that's what's gonna put us there on the map, right? So now then, coming back to your second question on cognitive, I think cognition, so been in tech for decades, right? So when RPA came, people said jobs will be gone. Frankly, there are more tech jobs. The salaries are going up. When AI came, and this is a term coined maybe 4 or 5 decades back, nothing is gonna. I think the jobs are not gonna go away. The people who are doing performing some of the laborious jobs or menial jobs, I think that whole value prop will move up. You don't want a person to enter data today, right? If I use computer vision models, what am I doing? I mean, there is a guy who's looking at a piece of paper and entering data, to me it's a waste of his life, right? There's no value add that he does after entering 100 of them, right? So if I could use a model that could predict, that could learn that could reach that image and populate, kind of directly impacts my value ecosystem. Now, someone could question that, why do I have a paper? Maybe 20, 40 years down the road, we won't have paper, right? All governments are converging towards that, including India, right? Digital India. So I've seen a massive, efficiencies that have come into logistics. We just talk about e-way bill. Look at the way the government is using data, right? So if there are truck moving, they know what purchase orders are moving in the truck. They know which vendor is operating that truck. They know this vendor has been caught 4 times with narcotics. They can predict a model and tell the flying squad that stop this truck, right? Do a frequent check of this truck. So the data prop itself, I think the data is value. There's still 90% of the data that's dark. We call it dark data that's just residing in the enterprise. How you unlock it, I think is gonna kind of build that. And cognition is about that. How do you supplement every business process to make it smarter? I think that's the value prop there.
Thanks, Kapil. I spoke about 3 tenets of supply chain earlier: resilience, agility, and sustainability. So it's very important that we talk about sustainability as well before we really wrap up and run out of time. Just one example I want to share is, there's a large global FMCG, which has created and interconnected about 30 factories worldwide and created, that digital twin for that. Now, using that digital twin, they prescribe a lot of sustainability actions, and they proactively. It's not like post facto. And there are some numbers, and it's a very famous case study, which talks about that. They have been able to reduce energy consumption by about 40% and waste by 20%. So sustainability, a lot of times you'll talk about that. Yes, it will require a lot of cost investment, but there is also a huge payback, as much as there's a need from regulators and shareholders and all that, etc. So I think my question maybe, Kapil, I can start from you itself. On sustainability in India, of course, a lot of organizations have started to think about it, started to take some initial actions, and some have actually are a little ahead as well in terms of what they are looking to do. As a service provider, what is it that you are offering to different clients, customers, where you're supporting those initiatives?
So I think there's a whole ESG group that's kind of powered there. Sustainability is important for everyone, and I think businesses are getting more, I would say, more aligned to that philosophy. So there's a lot of initiatives that we are doing. When we look at a lot of the shipping line movements, we're looking at seeing that can we flag this container, what is the green footprint of this shipping provider, right? So you as a customer can make an informed choice and choose the right carrier, which is kind of helping with the overall sustainability of it. And then there is sustainability. So then there's the sustainability angle, I think, with respect to business, if I may. Then I think it's sustainability. I would say that it's all about being nimble and agility. If you are an agile organization, you stay relevant and you say that whole sustainability agenda kind of moves on. You have to question the old thinking and move towards the new. How fast you can adopt to changes and the market scenarios around you would kind of drive your sustainability quotient, if I may. Right. So I think those are certain areas where we are now looking at technology to kind of drive the next wave of sustainability for us, and not only for us but for our customers as well, right? Because if we are able to do it better, then they are able to do it better.
Thanks. Prajakt, so some of the startups, are you offering them better valuations when they're really focused on sustainability measures and higher funding?
No, I think, no, I don't think there is any increase in valuation because of sustainability, etc. I think some of these things, but by and large, sustainability is becoming mainstream as part of the conversation. It's coming into the thinking. Has it started becoming mainstream in adoption? No, certainly not. It's still a long way off. However, I think, when you look at sustainability, you don't need to necessarily look at it only from good for the environment, good corporate citizen, etc. point of view. Sustainability can actually, help save cost and improve profitability. I'll give you an example. Most of the packaging in today's world was designed for an era when the product needed to be attractive on a shop shelf, and therefore large boxes and stuff like that. Now, अगर वो phone का box if it's in the shop, it will attract my attention. But do I need that same large box when I'm ordering it online? I don't. And therefore, how do you leverage technology to be able to say, okay, if the phone is ordered from here, this box goes, and if the phone has to be get kept in a shop, these boxes go. Now, these are areas in which direct cost savings can happen because you leverage technology to bring in more flexibility and nimbleness into your operations. But as you know, every company responds to market dynamics, and as the markets start demanding more and more, better or environmental friendly product, those things will happen. I mean, the other day, somebody had put together a compilation of TikTok videos and the Chingari app videos, where in local language influencers were talking about, when they were explaining the product, the last line was, and this company claims to be environmentally friendly. Now, when conversations start at that level, just imagine the kind of market forces that will convert into action.
Thanks, Prajakt. Uttam, I'm sure you must be putting out saying that we've saved so much of emissions and footprint for your clients. Any light on that?
So I think when you drive efficiency in an ecosystem, you're contributing to the green goals and the sustainable goals. But unfortunately, the hard reality of a user, and I think I'm talking about my set of users, which are small SMEs, is that for them, whether the delivery is green or not, I think is only a brownie points, right? They don't want to pay anything extra for that. So again, I think if we have opportunities, as Prajakt mentioned, that where your green initiative can also bring in a lot of efficiency, I think those are the initiative where you see a high amount of traction. Otherwise, I feel that government is already currently playing a role where I think they are mandating a part of the fleet should be EV, and again, I think they are currently subsidizing for that deficit. So I think those initiatives are helping for this adoption. And as a platform, again, I think in our journey, we have been again little late in our drive of green initiative. But again, I think once we picked it up, I think that was somewhere around 18 months ago, we felt that again we can play a role of a catalyst in the industry. So I think that's where we
Gautam?
Quickly. So I think the 14 to 8% that we were talking about, it's an automatic sustainability outcome, right? So if you apply less trucks, or if you use less assets, you end up saving a lot of negative that it does to the environment. Beyond that, I think I would agree with the panelists, right? Companies are becoming smart enough to be sustainable and not increase the cost. I bought the other day, Nike shoes are not coming in boxes anymore; they're coming in the package boxes. That means the primary and the tertiary box is the bloody same thing. Monopacks, people are not using monopacks anymore. A lot of brands are not using that. Again, sustainability. iPhone reduces the size of the box and takes away the charger. It's sustainable, right? So all those things happening. I think people are more, and it's I think it's all for good in that sense, right? It's all leakages which are not required, and eventually gets you to be more sustainable, like the environment to be more sustainable.
Thanks. And Saurabh, sustainability, just quick word from you. We talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? And especially scope 3 is where you are like beyond the enterprise, looking at what needs to be done. How are you seeing those measures being taken from a logistics standpoint, and is there a role that technologies would play there?
Yeah, so let me give you a slightly different perspective on this. See, I think last 3 years, there was a lot of excitement about sustainability, right? And that led companies to put out targets, ambitious targets. Of course, they were 7 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out. But those targets are out, and that's great. What companies have started to realize now is a real challenge on how they will deliver on it, right? So there's an anxiety on the board that we are seeing now on how do we make this move, because moving organizations and creating economic case and finding innovations, that can drive this is a real challenge. Yeah. So I think the next 3 years are very important to be able to build momentum behind this for that excitement to continue. So that's one, and that I think will be driven from two forces. One, a force of consumers and customers asking for it. I think so. That will drive the speed of innovation. And the second is from the regulatory side, right? And we're already seeing in shipping, there are already norms out. Europe has put in very strict conditions on, what percentage of, your fleets can or ships can, run on traditional fuels and new fuels and things like that, right? So both of those forces will push this agenda further, and I think that pressure needs to be maintained. Where the opportunity comes in is for companies to find these innovations and the agility in the organization to drive and adopt it. And the ones that do that, I think will definitely sort of benefit from it. Because if there's regulatory pressure, if you're able to adhere to it faster, you get more market share and things like that. So I think that's how we are seeing likely to see this evolve. But right now, this is this period where people are really wondering how to drive this agenda forward to be able to meet the targets.
Thanks, Saurabh. Just to wrap up now, I know time is up. See, sustainability is certainly a winning strategy. I think goes without saying, and I think irrespective of what we do, which industry, which profession, even I would say not just profession, even in our personal lives, I think it is something we all have to take to and adopt to. Supply chains of the future certainly are going to be autonomous, connected, integrated, and will leverage tons of data and digital capabilities. I'm sure those are some of the key messages in a nutshell you all would have got. A lot of use cases, examples, insights. I'm hoping that there are a set of takeaways that you've all got from this panel discussion. I must appreciate and thank you everyone for all your time and really great insights and a conversation today. Thank you.